Now, I want to address what I'm seeing, again, in social media. We get people sharing information all the time that myself as a person who studies through and teaches the Bible, of course, Bible prophecy is going to be all over, whether it's Old or New Testament. There are so many things that God tells about. Sometimes in this case, like he'll tell you about things, they're spoken by a prophet about future events, but to us they're historical. And sometimes we know that there are still future things because we're able to take a look at, like we did with Babylon, that Babylon was conquered by the Medo-Persians, but because of Revelation, we know it has a resurgence. So those types of things, really, really cool that we're able to look at that and realize that God can tell you about events before they ever take place. He's not limited by time. But we also find that people will read prophetic passages and they'll pick up on a phrase here or there, and then they begin to apply it in places where it simply doesn't fit. Here's one of those great examples, because I'm seeing it all the time, especially by the people who have a problem with modern day Israel and the Jewish people. And they'll say, well, they're not the Jewish people, they've rejected Jesus, and they start to look at the religious parts of Israel, which is very much the minority. So the observant Jewish people are they're not the ruling number of people there. It's very, very secular, especially you get along the coastal areas and places like that. It becomes far less religious. So much of the country doesn't live religiously. So to try to paint the entire modern day Israel as though somehow they're run by, by Orthodox rabbis is just, it doesn't fit with what we see historically. It doesn't fit with what we see in modern times. So there are the religious elements and there are very much secular elements, and you have them all throughout the country. And in some places there's some very uncomfortable kind of living arrangements where you have side by side very religious people and very non-religious people, and it can be kind of tense from time to time. They're very strong opinions, I guess you can say, among the people. We've watched it, we've talked with them, we know these things. But what's really important is when you hear sometimes people who claim to be prophecy watchers or people who are paying attention to things and they speak as though they're great authorities on this. I'm used to hearing this, the Synagogue of Satan. And there's a particular group known as Chabad, and Chabad is a sect within Orthodox Judaism, largest one, I believe, of all of them. And it has worldwide following, and really believe that the guy who was kind of the founder, the originator of it, a man named Menachem Schneerson, is somebody that they thought was a Messiah, but he's been gone for 30 years. But many believe he will resurrect. You can see his picture all over Israel, and they do a lot of things. Chabad is very active in the Orthodox Jewish world. And so I've heard people say about the Synagogue of Satan, and that's Chabad, because what they want to bring in is the Noahide laws, or if you haven't heard, I did something on those laws. People make a lot more about them than I think that they ought to be, but Chabad has basically said the world should be governed by these laws, and so the basically much of the Ten Commandments kind of thing. So anyway, they get really worked up about that whole thing, and they start to talk about the Synagogue of Satan. So we know that that is a term that's used, and especially it's used in the book of Revelation. So there is the Synagogue of Satan. So when I hear people use that and they throw out the term now and try to apply it to someone, I think, okay, do they even know where the source of that comes from? They may know it's the book of Revelation, but I really do challenge the idea of using that term and applying it to any particular group right here, right now, because I'll always ask, well, why would you call them that? And they'll give me this litany of things. Well, they want to do this, and they want to do this, and they want to do this, and this, and this, and this. So they're a synagogue of Satan, okay? But they're using a phrase that the Bible uses, and it only uses it 2 times. It uses it about the church it's in chapter 2 and chapter 3, 2:9 and 3:9. So let's just go to it. It's actually the church at Smyrna. And we read this. So here he says to the church of Smyrna, now a persecuted church, he has no bad critiques of them. It's the only one of 2. Both of these 2 that have the, quote, synagogue of Satan that's hassling them are the only 2 that he really has no critique of, as far as error that he has to correct. So Jesus says to them, I know your works. I know your tribulation and the poverty by which but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say that they are Jews, but they are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. We're not told what the blasphemy is. We're not told anything about them. We're not told what they teach, what they believe, nothing. All that we know is that they claim to be Jewish people, but they are not. They claim to be Jews, but they are not. So we get a lot of times people will just throw it out as a blanket thing. Anything that is Jewish or wants to see Jewish, life according to the Torah or whatever else, they want to see that observed, then somehow they are the synagogue of Satan. I've seen it used that generally. Now, the other place, maybe there's more detail for us in chapter 3, because again, in verse 9, we get this. It says, indeed, let's read verse 8. I know your works, and see, I have set before you an open door that no one can shut, for you have a little strength, and you have kept my word, and you have not denied my name. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but they lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship have them come and worship at your feet or before you. So, in both cases, we don't have any details other than they proclaim one thing, but God recognizes them as something else. They're not who they purport to be. But does that mean that it's a blanket statement against all Jews? Well, if that was the case, then Paul wouldn't have felt as he did, and he wouldn't have said the same things that he says to the Jewish people or about them. Read what you see in chapters 9, 10, and 11 of the book of Romans, and you tell me if he thinks that the Jewish people are cast off and that they're all the synagogue of Satan, as though any Jewish person, because of their rejection of Jesus, is, quote, the synagogue of Satan. If you believe that, you've got to try to explain away Paul's feelings about the Jews of his time, and notice that he always went in until finally he started going just exclusively to the Gentiles. He would go in and reason with them in the synagogues. So if anybody that had rejected Jesus as a Jewish person was the synagogue of Satan, you would have seen it in the writings of the New Testament. And it clearly is not there. So when I think of the Jewish people, I think of the Orthodox people. I'm saying they're on the right track. They just need to come to an understanding of the Messiah that's promised in their scriptures, that he has already come. They're looking, they just aren't seeing him, and they're not looking in the right places. They're not taking away their own biases to realize that the Messiah who has come fits all of the requirements that they would expect. But they're also looking more for a political Messiah. To the secularists, or the people who know what they believe but don't, or who know what Jews are supposed to believe but choose not to practice it, they still do know from their own understanding that there is a messianic figure that's supposed to come. But again, they probably think of him even more so in the political sense, because he's going to be more of a politician or a deliverer of the nation, whereas the Jewish, the Orthodox would see him as both, as a religious leader, but also one who will bring in a whole new political order. So depending on who it is and what they're thinking, but the idea that there's no understanding of what a messianic figure is supposed to be, Jews don't have a problem understanding that something like that is coming. It's just, when's it going to be and who's it going to be? What are the qualifications? What will they be like? What will they do? That's where you start to have the big drop off. But as far as the synagogue of Satan, let's remember, this is John. This is literal place. This is a literal place. The 7 churches are known to us. We know where they were in the world. John was operating in that part of the world. So as Jesus is writing through John, Jesus is addressing through John the churches in John's area. The 7 churches are written, if you look at them and look at them on a map, they're written like this, along the coast of the Aegean, that sea that's there, and then it arches down and goes inland, and it winds up at Laodicea, and just below that is Colossae, though it's not one of the churches mentioned. But we know what's in the area. So these are literal churches that had literal problems. We know that to be the case because some of the internals of each of these churches, we come to find out through archaeology, some of the things that were said about them, and because of history, we know why they were spoken about the way that they were. They were literal churches. These were literal messages to literal churches, not some analogy, not some kind of poetry, not some kind of anything else, not speaking past them. It was spoken to them. And then the churches nowadays ought to understand what was being said to them and make sure that they are not falling into the same failures. But the synagogue of Satan, what we know about them is next to nothing. other than they purported themselves to be one thing and yet they were not, and they were creating problems for the church. That's as much as we know. But if somebody's going to call this group of people the, quote, synagogue of Satan and start to say, because they do this, and this, well, the synagogue of Satan were not told anything about the internals of what it was that they believed or what they were trying to do. We know that they were not being faithful to whatever Judaism would have been at the time, as their understanding would have been. They say they're one thing, but they're actually another. That's the extent of it. What they were teaching, we don't know. So the idea that we can somehow forget that it's 2,000 years since the term was actually used, 1900, since the term was actually used as though Jesus is speaking to modern day Chabad or anybody else, is just playing so fast and loose with the text that we should never even take that stuff serious. Again, I absolutely believe that the Bible speaks to our day in volume. There's so much that is there. But when I hear people just start throwing slogans around all the time or repeating the same tired stuff, that it's like they've never really thought through it, I just get really tired of listening to it. But we're seeing it all over the place all the time. And we just want to say, as far as the church is concerned, we ought to be a bit more careful about the terms that we use, and then ask ourselves, do they actually match what we see in day-to-day life around us? And is there any way that you could try to make the case? In this case, calling something the synagogue of Satan or some group of people the synagogue of Satan, you can say it all you want to, but you're just using a slogan or a phrase that doesn't even apply to today. And so, again, people can use their terms, they do it all the time, but this was one that I've heard so often say, I've heard it applied to the entirety of the nation of Israel as it is now, secular and non-secular alike. They're the synagogue of Satan. That's who Revelation's talking about. Well, if you're going to take that view of the book of Revelation and you're going to say that that's speaking about modern day Judaism, or that not even Judaism, the modern day state of Israel is the synagogue of Satan, you're not even bothering to look at what the text has to say here, because that's clearly not the problem. And so there are elements within the places where both Philadelphia and where Smyrna were, that were creating problems for the church. It doesn't work today. It just simply doesn't. So knowing what the text has to say before we start using terms, probably a very good idea. So if you have questions on that, anything I shared during the Isaiah study, or anything you'd like to make comment on as far as that topic is concerned, the synagogue of Satan, contact me through the ministry's website. It is oldpaththeology.net. Again, if you want to know anything about the Israel trip, please contact me. I'm certainly hoping that we get a chance to go there, and it will be a trip of a lifetime for sure. It's going to be a very, very wide open country at the time. If things go as I expect, I don't think a lot of tours are going to want to be there, and that's just fine. I will be completely safe while I'm there. But we'd love to have you join us, and you can contact me and I can get you the details.